Okay, so A2C numbers 22 and 23. Okay, for 22, since it is multiple choice, you can put in the original into desmos and then start putting in your answer choices. I'm going to put in all just to see what happens. Remember, everyone should be doing the same thing, putting in the original and then putting in the answer choices. All of your letters should be lowercase. And it's asking which is a factor. So if you were using desmos, whichever line goes through the parabola, the quadratic, the original, at the x-axis is the factor. So even if it wasn't multiple choice, if you factored this, you could put in your factors and see, do your factors cross the quadratic at the x-axis. If you were doing this by hand, you're looking for two numbers that multiply to be negative 30, but add to be 7. So you would think about your factors of 30, 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3, 10, 5, 6. But then you would look at your, which one would give you positive 7. If I do negative 3 and positive 10, those two factors would be x minus 3, x plus 10. And then you can see which one that is. Notice that they gave you a 3, but not the right one. Other questions? Number 8. So 8.4b, number 8 is in your quadratics. Number 8 and 9, it doesn't say this, but you're looking for the solutions or the roots, the zeros, the x and x's. So with any of those problems, you can put that directly into desmos. And then see where it crosses the x axis. You can put the 0, you don't need it. And with any problems that ask you about this 0 solutions roots, if it's not a whole number or not a decimal or fraction that you recognize, so like this is something that we should recognize, it's negative 1/3. But if you get a decimal that maybe it's not something you recognize, you're given the quadratic formula on this, but also in your formula sheet on the SL, you could use that instead. Like 9, you would use that. But then your answers for this one would be negative 1/3 and 1. Other questions? So I'm gonna forewarn you that this is not something we talked about because the likelihood of it being on the SOL is like maybe one question, if at all. but I'm going to show you. Again, you'll be given the formula that's written over here. I'm just going to rewrite it just so I have it to refer back to. This is not something you will need to remember. I would be able to recognize the quadratic equation in general, the standard form, because all of the pieces of the quadratic formula is going to be from that. So in order to do this, I have to, first let me show you this. Sorry, I'm skipping around. This is how you would know you might need to use this. I'm going to type in the original, all of it as is. So when I look at this, I get decimals that I don't know what that would be as a fraction. That would tell you you probably need to use this. So I'm going to write that just so we have it, but more than likely you would see something that says leave your answer in simplest radical form. That would also tell you to use it to do this. So I'm just going to use this based on here. And this one. So I would first need to get this back in standard form, move my x squared term over by adding. And now I have an a value, a b value, and a c value. Then I'm going to take those three values and I'm going to put it into everywhere I see a, b, or c. So that's going to be x equals negative b, which is 12. So negative 12 plus or minus is the name of that symbol. The square root of b squared minus 4 times a, which is 9, times negative 1, all over 2a, so 2 times 9. Now, if in desmos you got whole numbers, could you still use this method? Sure, and what would happen is when you type in the square root of all of this, you'll get a whole number. Again, how you would know if you need to keep using this is if I type in the square root of all of that, you'll get a decimal. And not one that we could just write as a fraction. So I'd have to keep going. And I would simplify each piece separately. So the negative 12 stays, plus or minus stays, and then I would do this 12 squared. And multiply negative 4, 9, and negative 1. So that would be negative 36, positive 36, so plus 36. And multiply the denominator. Then there's two last things we have to do in order to write the final answer that they would be looking for if you got something like this. Add these. And then you need to use your simplifying radical rule. So again, if you put in the square root of 180, you're going to get a decimal. We want a whole number, or as best as possible. So we find the highest perfect square that goes into 180, which is 36. And 5. And the square root of 36 is 6. not in the radical can be divided by 6, so you can simplify that. And your answer would be this twice, 1 with a plus, 1 with a minus. These two answers are the two decimals you got. So, as I said, we did not do this because the likelihood of this being on the SOL is like maybe one question, if at all. So don't stress. Use desmos. More than likely, you're going to get whole numbers, and then you won't even need to worry about this.
On the SOL, do you think we're going to have all multiple choice?
You will have fill in the blank, choose all, drag and drop, multiple choice. It'll be a mixture. What percentage of each, I have no idea.
Can you do like just the inequality of interval notation for 8.5? Or can you just go ahead and do
So 8.5 is
yeah. Any of them, like ones you pay for. Choose.
So 8.5a, number 2. I'm going to put the original into desmos. All of your inequalities and equations can be solved in desmos. So go ahead and type that in. And it's going to give you either a solid or a dashed line. Dash would be not equal to, solid would be equal to. And this is going to be at 2, going to the right. So your inequality notation, x is greater than 2. Your interval notation is where you use square brackets, parentheses. It's like your domain and range, but from start to end. So we're starting at 2, and then if you were to zoom out, you can see this keeps going on and on forever and ever. So it starts at 2 and goes to infinity. This is open or dotted, so parentheses 2 to infinity, and that would be at 2 open to the right.
Close the square bracket.
Close the square bracket. But only for the number, not for infinity. Number 3, sure. So it'll be similar, but now it's facing the left. So our inequality notation would be x is less than 3. Our interval notation from start to end and that again would be open, but going to the left. Other questions?
A3 AB, number 1.
A3, number 1. So if this was multiple choice, you could use the decimal slider hacks. I'm saying if you got one like this. If it wasn't, you'd have to use your simplifying radical rules and then go from there. So I'll use the decimal stack first. If you want to see that done by hand, then you can go back and that. Also going to type this over here. Make sure you capitalize the X and Y here. Add in all your sliders. Because it's a square root, the X squared and the Z to the 8th, you could make the numbers negative and it wouldn't change anything, but just to make your lives easier, so that you don't make this a negative and say you can't do it, just make them all positive. Doesn't matter what you change those numbers to. And then start typing in your answer choices. And while typing in A, those decimals match. So I don't even have to check the rest. A is our answer for this one. Did anyone want to see that one done by hand? Or do you have a question? So if you're doing this by hand, I'm just going to use perfect squares and how many times does that index go into each exponent. So perfect squares, I'm looking for the highest one that goes into 50. 25 works. So 25 and 2. I know 2 goes into 2 once, so that would be 1x. That gets brought out, nothing left inside. 2 goes into 7 3 times. With 3 coming out, 3 pairs of y's coming out, and then 1 staying inside the radical. And then 2 goes into 8 4 times. So as I start to simplify this, I know the square root of 25 is 5. Everything outside of the radical will be near the 5. So x, y to the 3rd, z to the 4th. Based on just that part, I could eliminate c and d. I could then check if it was multiple choice to see if it was A or B, or if it was a type in your answer, I would need to keep going, write whatever's on the inside 2 and 3. And if you put this in, you get the same thing. Yes.
But just, can you do A for E 22 and 21?
A4, E, 22, and 1, 22. anytime you get a word problem, you can solve it in desmos. You can do it in desmos, but you have to know how to set it up. So if you set it up incorrectly, there's a chance you could get the wrong answer. So double check yourself, make sure you're setting it up correctly. For number 21, you will have a highlighter in test out, so make sure you use it, highlight it. You'll also have scrap paper, write down important information. So in 21, membership to a streaming network is $50 a year and $3 per movie rented. At the end of the year, Rayon had spent $176. And we're looking for how many movies did you rent? So when you set up these equations, you always need some variable in order to do it in desmos. So I'm going to call that whatever the question is. I'm just going to call it X for number of movies. And then I know because it's at the end of 1 year, the 50 is only just going to get added in once, or it'd be like 50 times 1 is 50. He spent 176 at the end of the year, so that the total equals 176. And since it's a total, I know I'm adding. And since I need my variable and it's $3 per movie, those are going to be removed. So then I could type that into desmos and then see what my answer is. You may have to zoom out. But once you type that in, you zoom out, you should get a vertical line, x equals 42. So that would be 42 movies. It jumped to a different color. Questions on that one? We're still going to do 22 first, so hold that question. So then in 22, Rosaline sold half of her coin collection and then bought 10 more. She now has 45. How many did she have to begin with? So I'm going to call that sum x. How many she had originally. So however much she had originally, she sold half of that. So those two are going to go together. She then bought 10 more, and she now has 45. So our equation should be 1/2 x plus 10 equals 45. I can put that into desmos and find what x equals. And 70 coins should be the answer. Remember that you could always go back and double check your answer by putting in whatever you get back into the original. Because you might get it to work accidentally, double check it. Especially if you set it up incorrectly. Gabriella, say that question again. So that one's a desmos question. So anything asking about zeros, x-intercepts, roots, solutions, you can type that directly into desmos. You can solve it, you don't need to. And it'll give you those two solutions, 1 and -5. And you will get that in the graphics. These things. C 16 and 20. Sorry. Oh, okay. So literal equations 16 and 17. Anytime you see anything with literal equations, you have a bunch of variables. You have to solve for some variable. You're doing that at the end. So in 16, when we have to solve for b, there is a couple ways that you can solve this. The easiest would probably be get rid of the 1/2, take the reciprocal, multiply both sides by 2. So that the 1/2 and the 2 cancel. And then if we're solving for b, divide both sides by h. So literal equations you have to know how to solve. There is no desmos hack for it. Questions on 16 before we do 17? In 17 we're solving for b. So we could get rid of the whole ax term by subtracting it to the other side. And divide everything by y at the same time, since there's nothing that would simplify. And then c minus ax over y would be your final answer.
We do 24 on A4E.
So on the same page, A4E at the bottom, number 24. Oscar bought 4 puzzles and 6 video games for $128. Devin bought 3 puzzles and 2 video games for $54.75. We need to find the cost of each. You are comparing 2 different things, puzzles and video games, and 2 different people. You have 6 numbers. That's going to be 2 equations, a system of equations. Once you set them up, you can use desmos. So I'm going to call puzzles just x, because you need x and y for desmos. You could call them p and v or something else, but you would have to change them to x and y to put them to desmos. For the cost of each puzzle and the cost of each video game. If we have 6 numbers, all of them are going to get used. The totals are given. How do we think we would set up both equations?
The first one would be 4x plus 6y equals 128.
And then the second one?
3x plus 2y equals 54.75.
3x plus 2y equals 54.75. Put those both into desmos. And you're looking for those two lines and where do they cross. And that would tell you the cost of each, $7.25 for X, which was the puzzle, and $16.50 for Y, which was the video games. Other questions? 8.5C, what's number? 13 and 14. So for 13, Sean is using a coupon to a local restaurant. He must order a drink and spend more than $15 when he redeems it. His soda costs $2.75, and tacos cost $3 each. What is the minimum number of tacos he must order in order to use it? Sorry. What is the minimum number of tacos he must order to use it? Okay. So I'm going to call some variable x, and that would be for number of tacos. He has to spend more than $15. So I know at the end it's going to be 15, and more than, that could be greater than, not equal to, because he has to spend more than that. It can't be equal to 15. How would I set up the rest of that inequality?
$2.75 plus 3x.
Okay, so then from that point, put it into desmos. And we're talking more about that. So, could we have 4.083 of a taco? No. So then we have to decide, would we round up or round down so that he spends more than $15? Because if you round it down, he wouldn't spend the $15. So we're going to round up to 5. So he would need to buy at least 5 tacos. He could spend more than that. It was supposed to be approximately 5 tacos, but orders being weird today. If he bought more than that, that'd be great, but he couldn't buy less than that. Questions on that before we do 14? So with 14, you are decorating your room with posters. You want at least 2 large posters and the rest will be small posters. You only have $50. Large posters cost $10. And small posters cost $5. We need to write a system of linear inequalities to represent. So we're not solving anything, we just have to write it. So you know it's going to be 2. So we need 2 variables. Since we're just writing, we can use L and S, X and Y, it doesn't matter. And that would be for the number of. The second one is easier to deal with than the first, so we'll come back to that one. You only have $50, so we know that's going to be a total. What symbol could we use for that? Less than or equal to. Because we can spend up to $50, but we can't go past that. And then we would just put those 2 together with our variables. So 10L plus 5S. The other one, you're just going to use one number to at least would be which symbol? Not less than. It would be greater than. Because we want 2. If we have more than that, that's fine. And then this is just going to be L. Yeah. So you wouldn't need to solve anything or find anything else. That would be your answer. Do you have any other last minute? I need to ask this question. Yes.
Could you do number 20 for 8.4?
8.4. Number 20, yes.
Why did you say L is greater than or equal to 2?
Because we want at least 2 large posters. So 8.4D, system of equations, number 20. Anything with equations, type that into Desmos. As is. And you'll see that these 2 lines never cross, they are parallel, so this would be no solution. I'll get to the right page so I can write it down. Other last minute, I really want to ask this question.
For 8.5b, like I already did the problem with the solution is like on a dotted line. Does it count?
So for your linear inequalities, if it's asking is a point a solution or to find a point, there would be a solution. If it falls on the dotted line, it is not a solution. If it falls on a solid line, it is. Other last minute, I really want to ask this question to everybody.
Can you do 8.8, number 3?
8.8 number. Yes. in this scenario, we have the cost per person to rent a cabin varies inversely to the number of people. If 5 people, I'm going to highlight that in the same color. Share, it costs $36 per person. How much would it cost per person if there were 8 people? So it says varies inversely, or it says varies directly, or it's going to ask if it's varies inversely or it varies directly. So you'll know you're talking about variation. Because it varies inversely, in our mindset we need to be thinking these 2 things. K equals x times y or y times x. And y equals a over x. It's going to look like the hyperbola, is what I need to be thinking in my mind. So to find k, I need to multiply the given x and y. Or you could set this up, so I'll show both. The given x and y would be the first 2 numbers you see, 5 and 36. Multiply that. So what you get? So once you find your k, you can do one of 2 things. You can either set up your equation, put in the missing piece, and solve for that, or you can use desmos. I will show both. So in this case, whatever comes first is always y, whatever comes second is always x. So we have cost per person. Sorry, in the second part. We don't know the cost per person, so that would stay y. But we know the number of people, and we could just divide that. And then $22.50 would be the cost per person. So I'll write that, and then I'll show you how you could just do that in desmos also. Once you have k, you could just put that equation into desmos, except now with the 8, just with x. You're going to get your hyperbola. And then we know that x is 8, so you would type in x equals 8, and find where those 2 lines cross. Either one. We're going to stop there. If you have other dying need to know questions, you can come up to me or I can come to you. For the remainder of class, you can keep working on JLab, ABLE packet, this packet, Delta Math, singing with the curriculum you have.